We're going to start off today with Chris Maddish, joining us from Pennsylvania. He's a teacher and interested in many aspects of vexillology to include designing flags. Chris is presenting his paper on flags over Machias Seal Island. Chris, over to you.
Thank you. All right. Enchanté. Je m'appelle Christopher Maddish, and that is about the limit of my French, because I sort of went to the gray zone. The United States has one last gray zone where it's undetermined land that is contested between Canada and the United States. And going there, I'm going to give you a little bit of the history and talk about the flags that were flown on this isle. I visited last year in 2021. So there's the famous lighthouse on Machias Seal Island. Okay, so let me give you the breakdown of the contested island in the gray zone, land area Machias Seal Island. It's about 20 acres. And those are the statistics of land, which is very small. But when you take all the land area, the surrounding waters, that's a lot bigger. In the United States, it's almost the same size as Washington, D.C. And from the Canadian perspective, it's maybe 1/3 the size of Ottawa. So this would be the fisheries, not the land. Land only makes up 8% of 1 kilometer. All right, so here it is. Give you the basics. It's right on the border between Maine and New Brunswick. An interesting fact is, in 1984, Canada and the United States went to the International Court of Justice to get George's Bank, which is in blue, settled, but they purposefully left out Machias Seal Island in that special area. To my benefit, I guess. We wouldn't be here otherwise. Anyways, a closer look at this area, the contested between Canada and the United States. Of course, the most important aspect that's contested, it deals with the fisheries, especially with the lobster industry. But the other groups, like the wildlife community of Canada and the United States, they get along perfectly well. They want to preserve this area for the birds. I think this meme kind of captures the effort of what's going on here. It's a very small territory. I mean, some people compare this to as two bald men fighting over a comb. Nonetheless, it is a $500 million comb they're fighting over at the moment, at least with the fisheries. So you can figure out which is which. I'm not going to say who's dominating at the moment. Anyway, so we go back to the background, the history of this area. Machias Seal Island is in red, which would have belonged to the Passamaquoddy Indians. And they're the people whose territorial homelands would have included Machias Seal Island and Grand Manan. And you can see they have their own flag right there. And the interesting thing about the Passamaquoddy, they're of the Native Americans or the First Nations people who are on the border between Canada and the United States. So they're familiar with the lingo, whether they're on a reservation or a reserve, First Nation or Native American. So you do that balancing act quite neatly. And to open this up, because I can understand it could be a touchy issue, I found this online, a video produced by the International Joint Commission, which is a bilateral Canadian and American organization that regulates the waters all across Canada and the United States. There's their logo. It has a Canadian and US flag, of course. It was organized in 1909. Anyways, the first European power with a written claim to the area was Spain, according to the Papal Bull Inter Caetera on Star Wars Day, May 4th, 1493. They never really asserted their claim or went to the area. And of course, the first people, old world people to this area were the English, John Cabot, flying under the English flag. Now, Acadia, which would include Machias Seal Island, had a very checkered history. I'm not going to go over each point, but it was basically a tug of war between France and the United Kingdom, starting with France, and then the UK captured the area, back to France. And then Robert Sedgwick captured it during the Cromwell Republic era. Of course, the restoration of King Charles III got brought back the English colors, the king's colors. Then back to France. And there's an often overlooked period where the Dutch were in the area. Officially on paper, they were there for about 4 years, but actual control was more like 1.5 years. And they were active in, I guess, from St. John's to Penobscot Bay, and the St. Croix River, of course. And back to France. And then there's like sort of that divided area right before the American Revolution. A little history of during the American Revolution, or you could frame it as the first Anglo-American Civil War, was the interesting point takeaway is Great Britain, tried to take that area and form the colony of New Ireland, but according to the Treaty of Paris, it was canceled and it went back to the American side, and New Ireland disappeared. And then during the War of 1812, the same thing happened again. They tried to give a second go with New Ireland. However, just like the first one, it was a no-go after the Treaty of Ghent was signed. Nonetheless, the British, or the Canadians, were able to collect a great sum of money, which was used to produce a library in Halifax, Dalhousie College. And of course, the Canadian Prime Minister went there, part of the legacy, intertwining legacy between Canada and the United States. Oh, we're going to skip a little. So the big debate, it all comes down to the Treaty of Paris. It's ambiguous. You can take the Canadian side, you can take the American side. At the moment, the governments interpret it two different ways. Now, the pros for the Canadian side, I'm just going to highlight the red points, is they established the lighthouse in 1832. Well, the British did, not the Canadians necessarily, but they've been there and they've had light keepers and they invested millions of pounds and dollars. So you would think in international laws, it's considered if you're manning a base there or some sort of lighthouse, it counts as sovereignty. It's a very good argument there. Now, for the United States side, I'm just going to highlight the blue areas so we can get to the questions at the end. The U.S. asserts its sovereignty because it has border patrol agents in the area, and they've been active, a little more active when it was during the Trump-Trudeau era. And the fisheries, U.S. fisheries have operated in that area almost continuously. It wasn't until like the early 2000s that Canada started to assert, hey, this is Canada, you gotta fish somewhere else, please. Anyways, and of course the last bit is, it's almost like a kid claim. The United States says, I never called it, I never recognized it, so it belongs to us. However, I think you can make the argument right now, it is a gray zone. Why? Why is it a gray zone between Canada and the United States? Because neither side regulates passport control. I went there, and the governments are well aware that people from foreign ports are visiting this island, but yet they don't issue passport control. That's one of the acts of sovereignty. Both governments are well aware. I mean, people from different countries could be visiting Machias Seal Island. They would never know it. And of course, another reason why it's the gray zone, both fisheries are active in that area, and that's leading to some of the tensions there. And if you get caught in some parts of Canada or the United States, and you just decide to skylark across the border and you get caught, you get a $5,000 civil penalty. So that's how it's in like different regions across Maine and I guess Washington and British Columbia. Of course. Okay, the Grand Manan Fisheries Association. This is Grand Manan Island. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize. Maybe this is like an inside joke. Maybe if they redesigned the logo to include Machias Seal Island, that's where it would be. The little dot would be North Rock, and the one by the bottom would be Machias Seal Island, the main body of it with the lighthouse. So, flags. The British Union flag most likely flew on this island during the British period from 1832 to 1867, when they first built the lighthouse. There's research that indicates that the Chamber of Congress at St. Andrews, New Brunswick, allocated 750 pounds to build this lighthouse. This is where everything started. And that's the name of the first lighthouse keeper. The British ensign, did it fly on the Machias Island? I can't say for sure, but I would assume so. Of course, the lighthouse was there in 1832. And a lighthouse was requisitioned in 1856. Again, this is still during the British period. Okay. Now the Canadian Red Ensign, most likely, definitely. We have a photo of this area. So these are just the general facts of this area if it flew on Machias Island. Okay. Now, the 48 U.S. starred flag, has it flown on Machias Seal Island? We can't say for sure, but a U.S. unit was there during World War I. They might have brought a flag. And now we have the Barna Norton era, which is like, he's the one, the infamous individual who kind of asserted a claim for the United States in 1983, when he got a letter notarized that his great-great-grandfather, one of his ancestors, got into a scuffle with some Canadians over this island. Okay. Photograph islands on Machias Seal Island. So one of the earliest photos that I found, you can see right there, at a close-up, looks like the British ensign right there. There's Barna Norton. He's the one who made the 50-starred flag there many times on the 4th of July, would bring tours there. And there's his State Department letter that asserts, I'll just read the last line here. It says, you have every right to ignore the regulations that Canada might pretend to set for Machias Seal Island. It's from the State Department. Okay. And here he is. Most interesting, unique item is the Machias Seal Island patch that he invented for the U.S. side, apparently. And he indeed brought it to the island. He didn't just do this in his backyard. And the John Norton era, this was his son. The next era, this is when violence finally erupted. A lobster fisherman lost his thumb scuffling with a Canadian lobsterman, Patrick Feeney. And the current owner, according to the story of Barna Norton, his daughter is Whitney Norton, and here she is. Oh, and the other flags that flew on the island are, of course, the Canadian flag, which flies most of the time, and the Canadian Coast Guard Jack. Here we are in the Whitney Norton era. Interesting thing is, though, the U.S. Coast Guard, we're going to skip past that. The U.S. Coast Guard visited the island and they hoisted the U.S. Lighthouse Service flag on North Rock. So that's another, and it was, even though it was during the tense period, but during the Trump-Trudeau era, there was still some cooperation between both governments. That happened on, we're going to skip through this because of time, the Lighthouse Service flag. I beg your pardon. You can read all about it in the text there. And again, it's associated with the U.S. Coast Guard. And here we are. I went to Machias Island and I flew this flag. I call it the binational gray zone flag. It was hoisted on July 29th, 2021. It's inspired by the flag of Gérard Galion in 1931. It was the third recognized proposal by the Canadian Ministry of Information back in 31. And on that date, I wanted to fly these flags in tandem because there's an interesting bifurcation with Machias Seal Island. So at the local level, these are not official flags. They're official logos. The United States on the left, Canada on the right. Again, adjusting grand bananas to include Machias Seal Island would look like that. County flags, Washington County and Charlotte County does not have a flag, so I use this as a placeholder flag. And state flags, national flags. This is a unique flag that I designed. It's the United States flag to include the external territories like Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. U.S. Coast Guard flag, I did not fly that because the Canadian flag was not hoisted. I would not fly it alone. Try to get equal representation. And of course, post-historical flags because of New Ireland and Nova Hollandia that existed in that short time span of just a few years. And of course, the Passamaquoddy and Acadian flags. Passamaquoddy were the most ancient peoples there, and the Acadians are the first Old World people to come to this area. And they were allied with each other for most of the warring period between United Kingdom and France. And I also brought the intersex and bisexual flag, because I think these two identities resonate, something that's kind of caught in the middle. And I wanted to increase the profile of these once oppressed people groups, give them an extra level of respect. They can kind of resonate with that in-between state, so to speak. And these are photos I wasn't able to do all the flags. I only got like a few up. So these are just photos that I did indeed bring them to the island. There's the county flag, the official county flag of Washington, Maine, the New Brunswick, Maine, the binational Machias gray zone flag. So in an effort to give you extra questions, the conclusion is, and in vexillology, we like to design flags, and we're kind of stuck with bad flags, replacing bad flags with good flags. But I would like to press for ideas that you can be the original author behind, whether it's geography, like I did at Vexibits, or some sort of historical event. Create a flag, and it's like post-historical to underscore it. And if you're the first one to do it, it gives you a little bit of clout and predominance. And I'm the first person to do this. Oh, and the final thing we can have with this island, there's 4 different options. It can be winner or loser. One side gets it, the other doesn't. Could possibly divide the isles. And there's the possibility of a middle path where the governments use this as an intersex binational area, sort of an experimental protocol. And finally, the status quo. So Machias Seal Island is, I think, this image sums it up. It's something like a conjoined twins, where the 2 souls are stuck in one body. They're almost like quasi magical slash supernatural beings, but here they are in the flesh and blood. That's Brittany and Abby from Minnesota, probably the world's most famous conjoined twins. All right, any questions? Yes. Man, I went on Puffin tours, and you have to reserve months ahead of time, and you have to go through a filtering process. So it just took time and planning.
I really mean physically, how do you get to that?
Yeah.
Helicopter or boat? Or?
Boat, by boat.
Okay.
Okay.
So you need a passport?
No passport is needed. No visa. Yeah, question?
I have a question from our chat box. When you leave the island and return to the US or Canada, do you need to show a passport?
No.
No, you don't.
No passport is needed. It's an enchanted isle that's typically covered in mist. So getting weather like this was, the guy who took us over, the harbor master, was just like, this is really weird, and this never happens. Once in a lifetime kind of weather. It's usually covered in things. So another proposal here is maybe Puff the Magic Dragon, be a good theme of it, or the puffin is obviously would be the territorial bird, and maybe a tartarin.
There's actually another question in the chat box. Did anyone object to the flags you raised?
No, not exactly, because it's really politically, they have it all worked out. When I went to the island, the Canadians, someone from the Canadian staff came out and says, can you please get into the bird blinds? They're like little huts. And they didn't say pull down the flags. They said, you need to get in the blinds because of the environmental, we're trying to protect the birds. So they didn't necessarily, I wasn't going to be rude. I was like, oh yes. And I just stopped my activity that because I was only able to lift about 4 or 5 flags on the island. Okay, and last but not least, here's the flag that journeyed to that mystical island. So we get it right side up. Machias Seal Island binational gray zone flag. Yes.
If there's no passports involved on either side, who's doing the building?
I would assume. Okay, the question was, who's doing the passports? There's no passports necessary. It's the tourist agency. There's one that operates in Maine, and there's one that operates in New Brunswick off Grand Manan.
And what are they looking at?
You just send them an email, and if the space becomes available, you put your name in. I mean, I think it would be the perfect venue for a NAVA meeting because it's binational. That would be awesome. Like off season, we could like tear the place up. There's no birds. They wouldn't mind. We have to, because, bring our own lobster right there. Lobster every night.
I think Jack has a question.
Is it completely uninhabited?
Can you state the question?
Yeah, Jack's question, is it uninhabited? Yes, there's nobody who permanently lives there as an address, but there is New Brunswick University, one of the university is there, and of course, the Canadian Lighthouse staff keepers are always manned, asserting their sovereignty. Yes?
Just a comment from the chat box. Such a beautiful flag.
Oh, thank you. Another question.
What would the facility be?
Pretty Spartan. There's like 3 or 4 huts. In the video, you can see close up. I would think it could probably accommodate maybe 30 people. No more, no less. I mean, no more than that, because it is very tiny. People, in theory, would have to stay on a boat. Yeah, it's a cute island. You do feel that mental game of, this is a weird place. It's magical. If it's ever decided to, unfortunately, it kind of will lose its magic. When Canada and the United States get together, sometimes lightning is captured in a bottle. For instance, we have Saturday Night Live, we have Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, and of course, Superman. Superman is seen as an American icon, which is true, but he has a secret identity, is that he's Canadian. Because the creators of Superman were Canadian and American.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, thank you very much, Chris.
Okay, thank you.